Next is learning to knit with a computer. The knitting practice pieces and garments knit on this tape are simple. Their main function is instructional. Learning the basic steps to machine knitting is made much easier with the computer. The computer has been designed to make knitting more enjoyable and easier. The language of the computer is simple and helps with every step to ensure successful knitting. The computer console has three main areas. At the top right is the visual display. This is where the computer speaks. The computer asks questions and gives directions and reminders in this window. Below the display window is a keypad. This is how the operator speaks to the computer and answers questions. At the top and bottom of the console are two horizontal slits. Pattern sheets with self-made patterns are fed into these openings and advanced with the transport wheel at the bottom left. In this way, there is no limit to the number of patterns which can be entered into the computer. On the right edge of the console is the on-off switch. Turn the switch on. Machines which have not been used before or which have not been used for at least 10 days will bring up this display. The computer is saying that there is nothing in its memory. Some machines may have been tested by the dealer recently, and the computer will say wait. In this case, wait for the computer to prepare. The computer is ready to program when the display window says PROGR or Program. If another display appears, press the key with the three arrows until PROGR comes onto the screen. The key with the three arrows is called the fast-forward key. Should this key be blocked, press Enter first. If the display in the window is not in English, press the R key when the display Program is visible to get to the languages. For those with memory on the display, press the Enter key. This tells the computer, yes, it should memorize or store the upcoming information. The computer will next check which language to speak in. Push the No key for languages not wanted. The computer is asking if it should speak in English. Push the Enter key to say yes. It takes a moment while the computer loads its English language information into the program. The display now says PROGR, which stands for Program. The computer asks if it is to be programmed. To program a computer is to tell the computer how it is to help. Push Enter to say yes. The computer is asking if it should erase any other program that may be left in its memory. Press Enter, yes. The computer is asking what type of cast-on is going to be done. The different types of cast-ons will be explained later. For now, press the number 3 and Enter. The computer asks if these are all the patterns that are needed for this practice piece. Push No. It now asks which is stitch pattern A, or the first stitch pattern to be used. How to select patterns is also shown later in the tape. For now, press number 1, 2, 3, 9 and Enter. The computer asks if this stitch pattern is going to be altered. Press the No key The computer asks which knitting technique is going to be used. Knitting techniques will also be covered later. For now, press number 183 and enter. Is the stitch pattern going to be enlarged or positioned on the garment? Press the No key. The computer asks if a test piece of this type cast on and pattern is needed. Press the No key. Is this all of the stitch pattern information? Press Enter, yes. The computer asks if the garment is going to be formed or shaped. As this is only a practice, no shaping is needed. Therefore, press the No key. How many of the left needles, L for left and ND for needles, are going to be used? The computer reminds that there are a possible 90 needles on the left side of the front bed. Above the center guide rail is the needle scale. Starting in the center, the scale marks the needle positions, 90 to the left and 90 to the right. When setting up the needles, there are two positions. The working position, where the needle heads must be level with the top edge of the needle bed, and the out-of-work position, where the feet of the needles touch the center needle rail. At the lower edge of the front needle bed are the front pushers. Pushers help to achieve the knitting patterns. These pushers are now in the out-of-work position. Take the orange ruler and bring up 25 pushers starting from the center to the left. Align them with the fine marks on the lower half of the front needle bed. This is the working position. When the pusher feet are in line with the lower end of the needle channels, this is the at-rest position. The lock moves the pushers up and down according to the pattern being knit. Press 25 on the computer and the minus sign to indicate that the needles are left of center. Then press Enter. How many of the right needles, R for right and ND for needles, are going to be used? Also, the computer reminds that there are 90 needles available on the right side of the bed. With the orange ruler, bring up 25 pushers, starting from the center to the right. Press 25 on the computer and press Enter. The computer asks, is everything ready to start the cast on or to start knitting? Press Enter. The computer asks that the lock be put at the start position. The lock has an arrow pointing to the needle bed. That arrow pointing to the last right gray bar is called start position. Be sure the arrow is not pointing to the right of the last gray bar. By giving the computer this position, the computer can know where the lock is at all times, and all knitting is centered in the needle bed. Place the lock at the start position and press Enter. During the following knitting instructions, the computer asks questions by flashing the message. Answer the question by pressing Enter before going on to the next step. The computer is ready to cast on. Press Enter. Yes. The three bars at the bottom of the display indicate that the computer is talking about the front. The SX is a lock setting. The NX lever is on the left side of the front lock and on the right side of the back lock. The pattern selector dial is on the right side of the front lock and on the left side of the back lock. This dial is used to select the type of stitch. Set the NX lever to N on the front lock. Set the pattern selector dial to S. Then move the NX lever back to X. Press the Enter key. The bars at the top of the display indicate that the back is to be set. On the back lock, set the NX lever to N. Set the pattern selector to G. Then move the NX lever to X. Press Enter. This means to move the lock across the bed once, with the lock empty. That is, with no yarn in the lock. Make sure no feeding eyelet is in the lock, then move the lock smoothly across the needles in working position. This is the symbol for the racking handle in the down position. The racking handle lines up the needles on the back bed with the needles on the front bed. Turn the racking handle down. Check the upper racking indicator. The O on the front bed and the black arrow of the back bed must be almost opposite. Press Enter. The computer asks if the needles on the front bed are set correctly. ND stands for needles. The 3 bars indicate the front bed. Press Enter. Yes, the needles are in the correct position. Move the lock across empty. Put the correct number of needles on the back bed in working position. 25 needles to the right and 25 needles to the left of center are brought into working position. There is a very important rule when knitting, called the needle rule. It must be observed at all times when knitting on both beds. The rule is that the last needle in working position at right is on the back bed. The last needle in working position at left is on the front bed. Make sure that the needles are set up according to the needle rule. Place the edge springs on the last needle in working position at left and right on the front and back beds. When placing them on the needles, it is important to make sure the latches are closed. The needle should flow freely underneath the edge spring. The edge springs, 2 on each bed, must be used whenever knitting to give a neat edge. Press Enter. The computer asks that color 1 be brought into the lock. Take the first feeding eyelet into the lock by moving the lock to the far right of the bed. The lock will automatically pick up a feeding eyelet. Make sure color number 1 is in the lock. If by chance color number 2 is in the lock, change color by moving the lock to the far right to engage the color changer. Press Enter. The computer asks to set the stitch size. The stitch size regulator dial is at the center of the back and front lock. The stitch size is determined by the weight and thickness of the yarn. Set the stitch size dial to 4 on back and front locks. Press Enter. The computer asks to insert the strippers. O for orange color. Insert the strippers into the lock. The stripper holders are found on the back lock. The strippers slide in until the small latch clicks into place. Strippers are used to keep each stitch perfect without having to use troublesome cast-on combs and weights. The orange strippers are used for double bed knitting. Black strippers are used for single bed knitting. To remove the strippers, depress the small white key and pull out. Press Enter. This means to turn the racking handle counterclockwise. Turn the racking handle one complete turn counterclockwise. As the racking handle is turned, the back bed moves to the left. Also, there are 2 clicks, one when the handle is up and one when the handle is down. Press Enter. Set the front lock to LX. Remember to always set the NX lever to N before moving the pattern selector dial. Set the pattern selector to L. Then return the NX lever to X. Press Enter. Back lock should be set to N. Set the back NX lever to N. The computer has no more messages. The last message is still in the window and has stopped flashing. If Enter is pushed, the computer will give a current display of the row counter. The manual row counter is on the upper left-hand side of the front lock. It counts the number of rows knit. The 3 small white knobs above the row counter allow the row counter to be set individually. The small lever to the right of the knobs is to reset the row counter to 0. The trip cam for the row counter is on the front bed. The trip cam is the black narrow piece that slides in the upper guide rail of the front bed. Knit 1 row by moving the lock across to the left. The computer now says that it is time to turn the racking handle 1 full turn clockwise. Turn the racking handle 1 turn clockwise. The display is not flashing, so no communication is needed with the computer. Press Enter to have a display of the row counter. Knit 1 row. This display says the cast-on is finished or ended. Press Enter to return to the row counter display. Knit 10 rows using even and regular movements to move the lock across the needles. Not too fast, not too far beyond the edge of the knitting. The lock is at the right side of the needle bed when done. The row counter display shows 12 rows. Next is pattern knitting. To do this, press the ABC key. The computer asks if stitch pattern A is the pattern to be knit. Press Enter. Set the front lock to SX. Set the NX lever to N. Turn the stitch pattern dial to S. Return the NX lever to X. Press Enter. Set the back lock to GX. Turn the stitch pattern dial to G. Turn the NX lever to X. Press Enter. Move the lock to the far right of the bed, and the collar 1 eyelet will be dropped off. When the lock reaches the end, the second feeding eyelet moves up, ready to be picked up by the lock. Press this second eyelet down so the lock remains empty. Remove the orange strippers. There should be no strippers in place when the lock is empty. Move the lock to the left. Check that the racking handle is down. Press Enter. Are the 50 needles on the front bed still in working position? Press Enter. Move the lock to the right. Notice that 2 of the pushers on the front bed have been pushed down or into rest position by the lock as it went by. The lock is preparing the pushers to knit the selected stitch pattern. Are the 50 needles on the back bed still in working position? Press Enter. The computer message says that 2 colors are to be used and that the colors are going to be changed every 2 rows. Move the lock to the far right to pick up color number 1 eyelet. Press Enter. The front and back lock stitch size remain on 4. Press Enter. Insert the orange strippers, 1 on each side of the back lock. Press Enter. The front lock should be on LX. Move the NX lever to N. Turn the pattern selector dial to L. Return the NX lever to X. Press Enter. The back lock should be set on N. Move the NX lever to N. The display is no longer flashing, so the computer has no more instructions at this time. Press Enter. Set the manual row counter to 0. Notice that the computer display still reads 12, even though the row counter on the lock has been reset to 0. The computer row counter is always total rows knit from the cast on. When it is helpful to keep a row count within sections of a garment, use the manual row counter. Knit 80 rows. Use even and regular knitting action. Every 2 rows, take the lock to the right and change the color. After 10 rows, reach under and release the yarn from the yarn clip. This will give an even and symmetric edge. Take the lock to the far right and put both feeding eyelets down. Set the locks to N on back and front lock. With the left hand, hold the knitting underneath. With the right hand, move the lock across and back again. The knitting is released from the machine. Break the yarn off the end of the knitting and secure the yarn from the cones into the clip under the bed. This is a finished sample. The stitches are loose on the end of the knitting and can unravel. To keep the stitches from unraveling, thread the loose yarn into a needle and push the needle through every loose stitch. Pull the needle out and fasten the thread. This knitting swatch was made to introduce knitting with the help of a computer. It may be helpful to practice more with this practice piece to become familiar working with the computer. To start again, press the fast forward key. Does the computer need to be programmed? Press No. Follow the instructions of the computer as before. It may be helpful to rewind the tape to Start Cast On and follow along with the video again.